Today, millions of kids are stuck in a world that doesn't respect, support, or embrace who they really are. These are what Deborah Reber is calling the differently wired kids, the 1 in 5 children with ADHD, dyslexia, Asperger's, giftedness, anxiety, sensory processing disorder, and other neurodifferences. Their challenges are many. But for the parents who love them, the challenges are just as hard, struggling to find the right school, the right therapist, the right parenting group while feeling isolated and harboring endless internal doubts about what's normal, what's not, and how to handle it. But now there's hope, written by Deborah Reber, the best-selling author and mother, in the midst of the eye-opening journey with her son, who is twice exceptional. He has ADHD, Asperger's, and is highly gifted. Differently Wired is the how-to, a manifesto, a book of wise advice, and the best kind of been there, done that companion. All right, guys, you can probably hear a car. I am in the middle of the mountains, headed to Jasper, BC. We're on a little road trip with the family, but I wanted to share this beautiful conversation that I had with Debbie Reber. She's the founder of Tilt Parenting. It's a podcast, so go check it out, especially if you have differently wired children, and her new book, and it comes out June 12th, so I believe tomorrow, maybe, in a few days. You can check it out on Amazon, bookstores, anywhere you can get a book. Check it out, Differently Wired. This is what I love. There is a movement happening here of, how do I get my child to be normal? And it's not about that. And regardless if you have a diagnosis or not, we all have to realize that we have neurotypical, whatever you want to call it. We're living in a world where we have access to more information, but yet we're still trying to fit everybody in the same system, in the same model. And yes, there's a lot of mourning. There's a lot of grief that happens in parenthood, because we have, this beautiful story and illusion in our minds of what life is going to feel like after we have children, and it doesn't always work out that way. So regardless if you have a child on the spectrum or not, with a diagnosis or not, I think this is a beautiful book and conversation to listen to about accepting our children for who they are. And yes, definitely helping them through the process, but I think acceptance needs to come first. So let's dive in, and apologies for any nature background noise that you hear. I'm not in my studio. I'm not at home. And I got some crazy allergies up here, which is not typical. I never get allergies. So maybe it's from sleeping in damp places in our RV as we're traveling across a few provinces. And speaking of acceptance, Teach Your Kid to Meditate will be launching live. I'm doing a live round in July. So if you register before June 15th at midnight Eastern Standard Time, you're going to get a significant bonus, a significant financial discount. So right now it's $297 Canadian. It will be going up to $497 US. It's going to be worth every single penny. I'm throwing in some energetic time management, the energetic time management workshop and the aligned workshop, which are going to help you as the parent get super crystal clear on what it is that you want in your life, how you want to feel, and then also help you organize your time. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even know when I would implement this program, I'm teaching you how to do that. The Teach Your Kids to Meditate is about helping you help your children. So it's helping you implement and understand mindfulness as a tool, but also helping you implement and understand your child's big emotions. So this is a co-creative journey between you and your child. So this program is going to help you as the adult, and it's going to help you help your children. So I get a lot of emails from you guys asking, my child has ADHD, my child has autism, my child has nothing. They're just angry. I don't know what's wrong with my child. Will this help? My child is a teenager. My child is a year old. Will this help? And my answer is yes. If you feel drawn or connected to this program, it will be of service to you. The whole point of the program is to help you help your children. So if you have a toddler and you know, okay, well, my child's not going to specifically want to meditate per se, what you're going to learn about is an alternative and a very refreshing approach to understanding your child's negative behavior. So I'm going to be teaching you about the red, green, yellow zones. I'm going to be teaching you about understanding and seeing your child's behavior as a language. I'm going to be teaching you about mindfulness and how to start incorporating this into your life. So there's many activities that you can do with a small toddler. And then as a teenager, right, I get a lot of response from parents saying my teen or child doesn't want to meditate, and that's okay too. It's about incorporating mindfulness, and sometimes we ourselves need to incorporate that tool before we start teaching our children and coming from a different place. So a lot of it I can't even verbalize to you how the shifts have happened for people. And I don't want to say it's magic. All I want to say is I've had great response from this program. I've tried to make it as affordable as possible for you guys, but you do need to invest. And I'm telling you right now, if you invest before June 15th, you're going to be getting that discount. So head on over to teachyourkidtomeditate.com/program and check it out. What else do I have to say? Oh, if you have any personal questions, send it to our team at support@heatherchauvet.com. All right, let's jump into the interview.
Okay, we're recording and we're live on Facebook. So, Debbie, thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because this is going to be a game changer for so many parents and humans that are watching who, I'm just changing my microphone. Can you still hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So many parents and caregivers and teachers and anyone who interacts with a child in modern society. So thank you. I love your podcast, Tilt Parenting Podcast, and your new book, Let's See This Baby. Ta-da! Differently Wired. So welcome. Let's talk about how you even got to writing that book and a little bit about your story and your parenting journey.
Sure. So I am the parent of a 13-year-old teenager now, who is what I refer to as differently wired. And so this has been a journey for me really since he was born. And we just kind of realized that we were not on your typical parenting journey. And that was, I don't know why that was a surprise to me, but I'm such a researcher and I'm really good at getting things done and figuring things out. And I had plans and spreadsheets. And then I had this child who really from day one was not fitting into my chart. He wasn't like fitting into the plan I had created. And so, over the course of many years, we started to discover who he was as a person and how he is differently wired. And, through preschools that didn't work out so well, lots of phone calls from teachers over the years and the parent-teacher conferences, and then kind of entering the school system, the educational system, and finding out that this is really going to look different than we thought. This isn't just going to be go to our neighborhood school and we're good to go. And so over the years, as we were discovering who Asher is, I was also having to figure out how to navigate this journey. And I found myself completely lost and stuck and just not knowing how to get any resources. So over the years, now he's 13, we've kind of navigated our own path, and I've done a lot of research and just kind of figured out something that I thought would work. But I also became super passionate about helping other parents in my situation never feel that sense of isolation that I experienced, because our kids are everywhere, in every classroom, in every neighborhood community in the world. And so I founded Tilt, it's been a little over 2 years now, as a place for parents to connect with people like them, to know that they're not alone, and then also have access to just really great interviews with all the experts that, I wanted to talk to when I was going through this. So that's what I do through the podcast. And the book has become kind of the manifesto of Tilt parenting in book form, because I really want to amplify the message behind Tilt.
Awesome. And you kind of said that there was two messages in the book. So from my perspective, like I don't have any children been diagnosed, but I do understand what it feels like to feel isolated, because I think all children, depending on even a small behavior, right, you do feel isolated or alone. And the school system, I find, definitely amplifies that for you. It's like you can have a child at home and then all of a sudden they go in and you're like, this is real world parenting now. For some reason, education really brings that home, because this is where we realize who is our, how do our children think? How do they act in the world? But there's two core messages. I guess the reason why I'm saying this is because there is a lot of parenting information out there. We have the research background, we have the practical, we have stories, and then it's like people find themselves overwhelmed when they step into this world of like, now I do have these resources, but I don't really know what to do with them. So what does Differently Wired and the book really, what does it do for the reader?
Yeah, and I just want to say, first of all, that you don't need a formal diagnosis to be differently wired. So a lot of the people in my community, their kids do have something like ADHD, or maybe they're gifted, or Asperger's, or maybe they have an anxiety disorder, or they're especially sensitive, or a learning difference like dyslexia or something. But there are also many kids who don't have a formal diagnosis, but for whatever way, there's some aspect of the way they're moving through the world that just feels, that certain things are more challenging, that they don't fit into this particular construct as well as maybe a quote unquote typical child does. I agree with you. I think most of us are not typical at this stage. And so in Differently Wired, what I really wanted to do, one of my audiences are parents like me, parents who are looking for information and just to feel sense of connection. But what I wanted to do was help them feel, more than anything, a sense of choice. I think when we realize we're on a different path than the one we expected, we feel, we can go through a phase where we feel that this is something bad that's happened to us, that, we start really spinning out about what the future is going to look like and what does this mean. And it brings up our own stuff so much. That is such a huge piece of this. And so so many of us end up just trying to fit our kids in and find a way to push them in or have them adapt who they are so that they can just go in this system and go to this place, so it can look as close to everyone else's journey as possible. And I think that's the wrong way to approach this. I think that our kids are on their own unique journey and they deserve to be on their journey. Their journey is beautiful. It is fascinating. And there are so many gifts that come with this. And I believe we need to, rather than try to adapt our child to fit into the system, we need to change the system. We need to revisit everything, how we're looking at education and extracurriculars and, these rites of passage, just every aspect of a child's life. We need to figure out ways to include all of these kids so they can feel good about themselves, so they can really have the chance to tap into their strengths, because the model right now is so focused on deficit. So, in this book, a lot of this book is aimed at parents to help them kind of reframe their thinking in a way that will help them feel empowered and confident, and realize that when they shift the way they perceive their experience or shift the way they relate to their child, that things can change pretty quickly and in the most beautiful way for our kids and for our family.
And that's tilt, right? Is that where you got the word tilt from, like tilt parenting?
Yeah, it's, I need to come up with some words too, so that can actually be an acronym, but I'll just quickly tell you, Tilt, it was really hard naming Tilt, and Asher was very involved when I launched this, and he had a lot of opinions, as he does about everything, a lot of opinions about what name was appropriate or had the right connotation. And there was a picture right before, I live in Amsterdam now, we moved here 5 years ago. And before we made that huge shift, which in many ways was the change of everything for our family, I went to the Jersey Shore. And if anyone knows the Tilt-A-Whirl ride, where you're sitting and you get whipped around. So there's a picture of me on that with my mom and Asher. And we have these giant grins on our faces and we're holding on and our hair is flying and we're just like bracing for the next whip, but we don't know when it's going to happen. And that picture to me just summed up so much of how I felt. I was scared, but excited. And I knew we were turning everything upside down and we didn't know what was going to happen next. And so I ended up writing a blog, just for friends and family with the name Tilt-A-Whirl. And so when I launched Tilt Parenting and I was thinking of the right word, it was that word tilt that kept coming up for me as kind of representing this feeling of just shifting things and being prepared for the unexpected as much as you can be.
And giving yourself permission to create a life that scares you and excites you at the same time. And I think regardless of, who your child is, we can do that. And that's what I'm a huge advocate of is it's okay. I believe our children pick us, and regardless of who they are, their labels, their, way of being in the world, and they come through us, or they come in our life somehow, adoption or whatever, and we pick them. And it's like, great, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to rock your world. I always say parenting is personal growth on steroids, because they're going to rock your world. But yet you were chosen to hold them. You were chosen to guide them through this lifetime. So now I want to ask you a very woo-woo question.
Ooh, okay.
I love woo-woo.
Okay.
Because sometimes we need to think outside the box when it comes to coping strategies and what gets us through the day, especially in parenting and differently wired children. Do you think, I'm totally putting my own beliefs on here. My dog is literally trying to touch me underneath the desk here. So talk about children. Do you think what's your opinion on children who are, autism spectrum or spectrum of any sorts and differently wired? I hear about it more and more, and I see more of it. Do you think there is some consciousness happening of a shift where these children are coming into the world more open with this awareness and intelligence that is beyond what the system can hold for them? Because sometimes it can be very combative when a child is more intelligent than their parent or their teacher. And it's like, guys, this isn't going to work. We need to recreate the system, because it's just like the explosion of awareness is happening.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Such a great question. It's not something I've ever even talked about or addressed in Tilt. I think, personally, although in the creed, I have a Tilt creed, which is kind of like my statement of, what I believe. And at the bottom, the very last item is that differently wired is a modern day evolution. And I do see it in that way. I do feel like there are so many of these kids coming in to the world with these tremendous gifts and sensitivities and, just different way of moving through the world. And I like to think that this is kind of our evolution. This is moving, because these kids they're forced to be reckoned with. They're not going anywhere. And we're becoming more and more open to seeing their gifts. So I can only think and believe that they're here to shake things up in the best possible way, not just for us as the parents, because I totally agree. Our kids choose us. I believe Asher is, was a mutual decision. We chose each other, but, for many, many reasons that we both need things we need to be learning right now. But on a big scale, yes, I think there's a lot to be learned from what they're bringing in to the world right now. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is there's a lot to learn from these children. It's not us trying to fit them into our world. And I say this with quotations because I find in general in the parent relationships, it's I am an authority. You respect me, but don't worry about me respecting you.
It's just a one-way street. Like that's old paradigm thinking, right? Like, nope, you respect me, but I'm not going to respect you. And I think these children are definitely shaking that up, because if we're not looking at our belief systems, if we're not looking at how we're living our lives, we're not going to be able to cope, right? You're going to feel depleted. You're not going to feel whole. And we all know that parents, especially women, men too, are the foundation. You're the caregivers for these children. And if you're not taking care of yourself and being extremely mindful of your lifestyle, that's going to greatly affect your child's well-being and your household.
Yeah. And when these kids are younger, I think it's really difficult because, especially with kids who are, most of the kids in my community, they're differently wired in that they have invisible differences. So it's not so obvious. You might never know, like a teacher or, another parent's child might have no clue that there's actually a neurodifference there. So it can be really difficult because privately what's going on, or you're struggling with things and you're reading all the same books that your friends are reading. You're taking all the right classes, you're doing, maybe you're using strategies that your parents used on you when you were a child, and none of it's working, but it's working for your friends. So your friends might have these really compliant kids who are super polite, know how to share and blah, blah, blah. And then this other person is doing the exact same thing, but their child is pitching a fit on the, in the playground because someone stepped in front of them to go on the slide, So then, there's that, what's wrong with me? Like, we make it all about us. We worry about how we're being perceived, how other parents are judging us. We do a lot of damage control, and we really lose confidence in who we are. Mm-hmm. And so much of this is about kind of really leaning into who our kids are and becoming comfortable being uncomfortable, and just kind of knowing that, the usual strategies are not going to necessarily work. And that doesn't mean anything about you. That just means that we need to find new ways. And that takes a lot of courage and curiosity and time.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So a big pain point for people is, we'll just use school in general. There could be many different forms of that. Could be preschool, could be high school, could be grade school, anything. So we know that the school system is run by people, right? And every single human that you come into contact with, regardless if it's a bus driver or somebody walking down the street, a teacher, a principal, an aide, everyone has their own opinion. Everyone has their own life experience. Some people are book smart, so they've, have a PhD in something, but there's no social interaction awareness there going on of like, how do I look at this child? So it is a very complex subject. So what do you do as a parent when you have a differently wired child and you're trying to advocate for your child? Maybe tell one of your own personal stories that was like a huge shift for you. But I'm curious, how do you do that? Because you have the resources, you're aware, you're like, this is it. We haven't, in Canada, we call it an IEP. So you have everything that you've done, right? You're like, I know what my child's accommodations are supposed to be. They have an aide. They have all of these. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. What do I do now when I know that my child is going to get angry on the playground because of human interaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really difficult for a lot of parents, first of all, to even find themselves in that role, especially because it does require some advocacy. It requires some disclosure, maybe that we're concerned about is going to attach stigma to our child. So it's very complicated to know how to navigate this. I used to really struggle with even just, signing up Asher for summer camps. And I started doing that thinking I could just put him in camp. And of course I can just put him in camp. That's what you do. He goes to camp in the summer for a week here, and he does art camp here. He does marine biology camp there, or whatever. And, I learned after crashing and burning and having him being kicked out of some camps or whatever, that, I need to set people up more. And so I had to, I think we all, parents in my situation, this is a point where we all reach, like, what do I tell? How much do I tell? and how do I do this in a way that feels good? And it's not easy. I was very reluctant to even do it because I was afraid of putting a target on his back, and I never knew how much of this is my stuff, how much of this does the person need to know. I think my policy has been to talk to people what's going on a need to know basis, and for me it's taken me years to become comfortable to just really be open about a situation where we as a family might be going a party or a special event, or maybe there's a play date. Asher's been invited to a play date and the parent isn't aware of what's going on, but I know what could happen at that play date. And so I've had to learn how to just disclose and say, you know what, I just want you to know that Asher's super excited about, this is from years ago because he wasn't going play dates anymore because he's a teenager. But, this games can be really hard for Asher. I just want you to know, I know he's going to want to play a game with so-and-so, and just be aware that if things don't go his way, that could be really tough. And this is what it might look like. And if that happens, here are some things you can do. So, I don't have to discuss any diagnosis.
And I'm sure you have to get to a point where you can trust that parent as well, because there's going to be people that, I've had that with friends as well, where they're like, okay, Heather will be able to handle this, but not everybody can, right? And so understanding and trusting these people that you're leaving your children with. And a play date's one example, but we realize there's a million things, like you said, with camp and things like that. Yeah.
And it is, one of the chapters of my book is about finding your people and then ditching the rest. And so I think we start to learn over time. We develop this kind of radar where we can identify who our people are. And, for me personally, I've had to get good at identifying who my people aren't and just not even go in there. Like, it's not my job to educate this person or to try to convince them that this or that's going on with my child, or that my child is worth investing in. I'm going to pivot towards people who see who my kid is right away and want to hang out with them. So part of it is in that process, just making really clear choices and conscious choices about who gets to be in your world and who feels safe, because trust is a really big piece of it, especially again, when we're in those years where we're feeling so uncertain and lost. And I'd say for most parents, it's between kind of the ages of, late preschool, 4 or 5 through 9 or 10. And because those tend to be the years where it really starts to be clear there's something going on here that it's going to present challenges because they're not developing in a traditional way, or they're not doing those developmental maturity milestones or whatever it is, or academic milestones that you would anticipate. So it's really important to find people that you can trust.
Well, yeah. And because your child is going out into the world more and more and more, right? Like, I want to do this. And you're like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's terrifying. I want to talk about, I'm like, what? Because you and I could talk for hours and hours and hours, because this is just one microcosm of the whole bigger scheme. Like, I'm thinking about food and I'm thinking about all these things. And it's a game changer. It's a world changer. So I'm like, definitely they have to listen to your podcast and whatever resources that your speakers and interviewees. It's like, just, you find, like you said, you find your people, you find your tribe, and then you just go from there, right? Like a book or a title or a resource, and it cracks you open. Can we talk a little bit about the grief and loss? Because, you said one thing of like looking at my child and realizing that they're not who I thought they were going to be. And I had, I'm the researcher and I had all these spreadsheets and everything and knew what it was going to be. But one thing you just said about finding your people and getting rid of the rest, like that in itself is grief and loss and very hard. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. And I actually talk a lot about this in my book and I actually use the word mourn in my book, in that I think it's okay to acknowledge the fact that this journey is looking different than we thought, and that is going to trigger sadness, and that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong. And I think parents go through this with neurotypical kids too. I know that being neurotypical is not a guarantee for X, Y, and Z dreams kind of manifesting for what you want to happen for your child. But I do think it is important to acknowledge the sadness and give yourself time to process that. But then also really try to do that work on yourself to understand where's that sadness really coming from, because it's all our own stuff, right? It brings up our own insecurities and fears and baggage from our childhood and all of these things. And so, I have found that the things that trip me up the most are always my issue. And so, I guess that's parenting.
Yeah.
But
it's like, why am I the only one triggered right now? You're like, that's your shit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I think it's important to make the space to feel those big sad feelings. And I will say that I didn't give myself that space for a long time. I really judged myself pretty harshly because I was like, well, I should be able to handle this. I mean, I've been to therapy for years. I have all these tools. I'm a certified life coach. I know all this stuff. I know that, his autonomous being on the perfect journey for him. Like, I know all of this. And so I was really mad at myself for feeling as upset as I was, or just struggling with the things that I was struggling with. And so that was a big part of it too, is just giving myself a break, like being able to say, you know what, you're having a superhuman experience right now, and this is hard, and that's okay. And you just need to allow yourself to feel that and then move on. So, I'm not an advocate of indulging, like living in that space of grief or mourning. I think it's okay to say, yeah, this is hard. This is going to be different. And that is what it is. Now let's move forward.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of acceptance that needs to happen. And it's not just like, oh, accept it and move on. It's a personal experience, right? It's a personal growth experience. It's terrifying sometimes.
It's a shift of you kind of, and this takes a while. This did not happen for me overnight, but it's a shift of coming to a place of true acceptance of who your child is. So before we moved here, I thought I was like, I'm good with this. I know what's going on. I'm on it. I'm his biggest advocate. I love this kid more than any. And so I thought I was in a place of true acceptance, which is why I think when we came here and there were so many changes, I started homeschooling him at that time. So things changed for me personally in a huge way. And I really then went to an even darker place. I'm like, oh crap, I thought I was over this. So it was a process of continually leaning in, getting triggered, getting hung up, examining what's that about, moving through it. And then, and that just cycle repeats and repeats and repeats until I finally came to a place where, and that doesn't mean I still don't get tripped up with, and triggered by some of the same fears and things that come up, but really accepting who your child is and knowing that there's nothing wrong with them, that they are perfect as they are, that their gifts far outweigh any deficit that they may have or any challenges, and that our job is to build on those strengths. It's to help them really just rock their lives and know who they are and feel great about who they are, because they're perfect. Yeah. They're absolutely perfect. This is who they are. This is the way they're designed, and it's incredible and fascinating.
I think that in itself is the end game. Realizing that our children, regardless, typical, atypical, whatever, are perfect. We are perfect. We're doing the best that we possibly can. So if you ended up at McDonald's for lunch, you're not failing as a parent because, whatever. And it's like be extremely mindful of what is going on in your mind, because we put way too much pressure on ourselves. If I didn't do this or I didn't do that, and realizing you're doing the best that you can. And it's an evolution and a growth. And I just believe whatever conscious level you're at, that's where you're supposed to be. And, you will get to where you need to go, or the universe will give you a little punch in the face and you'll be like, oh no, now I need to do this.
Yes. Just when you start feeling too comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way it goes. But that's part of it. I mean, I think I'm finally in my middle age years. I'm finally at the place where I'm like, okay, when the things come up, I'm like, this sucks and it's hard, and oh, good, growth spurt. That is why we're here. If we're all just gliding along, then
to grow. I know there's constant contrast. That's for sure. So how's Asher today? What's it like raising a teenager? Those are fun.
Yeah. He's doing really well. It's just crazy to me watching this person change, and yeah, he's doing well. He's becoming, more private. That's one thing which, he used to be really involved in my podcast, and he's not wanting to be as engaged, which I totally respect and understand, and which is great because that's developmentally appropriate. And he's becoming more kind of interested in school and wanting to work hard at school. And he's just a really thoughtful, amazing human being with some very teen hormones. So it's awesome. a daily roller coaster, but it's so cool. He's my favorite person to hang out with. We just can talk about so many things, and he's fascinating, and it's really cool to see him growing up.
What does he think about the book?
He is simultaneously thrilled about it, and he's so proud of me. And I'm sure I know that it makes him a little weirded out to know that he's been written about. The book, as I assured him, it's really about our journey when he was younger and his needs not being met because I didn't know who he was. Mm-hmm. So the focus is really on my journey and figuring out who, and not just my journey, but I interviewed 100 or more parents. So it's more about our journey, and that we needed to adapt to meet the needs of these kids who are so unique. So it's not like the Asher and Debbie thing, and it's not Asher this, Asher that, which I think makes him feel better. But yeah, it's interesting. Because he is entering this more private stage, he had a moment of like, oh goodness, But I read the book to him when I was writing, and it was really important to me that he knew everything I was saying, and that mm-hmm. he understood, and that he was okay with it. So yeah, and he's very proud of his mama, which feels really nice.
That's awesome. And you know what I think is beautiful about this whole process is realizing, like, teaching our children that we're human, which, if I reflect on how I was parented and how my parents were parented, there's a lot of things that are definitely changing. Like even saying, I'm sorry to our children, or I've screwed up, or I'm human too, or allowing our children to see us cry and, realize that we fail and there's things that happen to us and we have heartbreak and, we mourn and all of those. I think that in itself, even though we're in it and we're feeling it, we don't realize how we're changing those generational patterns, that there is so much that, how would Asher's life be different, or all these children differently wired 50 years ago? What would that be like? And it's kind of scary when you think about it, how far we've come to even just allow and acknowledge that this is a thing.
Yeah, I think there's such a respectful way to parent when we allow our kids to see who we are as people, and especially with differently wired kids who can learn so much about who they are by us as their parents being completely transparent with our own journeys. Mm-hmm. We're modeling everything for our kids. And so I model failure all the time. I model insecurity. I got a review on the book that wasn't one that I loved. And I read it to them. I talked with them about what it brought up for me and how hard that is. And that's part of being a creative person. And that's probably going to happen to you too. So having those kinds of conversations and being really vulnerable with our kids, I think is the best gift that we can give them. And yeah, I think it really breaks my heart to think about all the differently wired kids who were, growing up when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, and they just were not seen in the same way at all. And there were very few options. Everything was treated like a behavioral problem. And then, oftentimes responded to with an authoritarian parenting approach, which was the norm back then. Mm-hmm. And that it's really painful to think about how many kids grew up feeling like they were bad or wrong or not smart or whatever it is because their parents or the school system or whatever wasn't equipped to see who they really were.
Mm-hmm. Love it. What do you say to that parent, educator, anyone who's watching that knows they're raising a differently wired child and they're overwhelmed and absolutely terrified and have no idea where to start?
So many things, but I would say
listen to your podcast, read your book, take a deep breath.
Yeah. Take a deep breath. I think the thing that hurts us the most is going to a place of fear, which is a real easy place for us. And when we're in that place, it's hard to see, we can just kind of stay there and spin, and it's hard to see any possibility. And that is so harmful to all of us. So first of all, knowing that you're not alone, for me, that was huge. I know that's what so many parents I hear from at Tilt, when they connect and they're like, oh, finally, I hear someone who knows what I've been through. We are everywhere. So don't think that no one else is experiencing this. No one else's kid has been kicked out of 4 schools. Your people are here, and there's a lot of us. So that would be one thing. And then, just choosing your child, choosing possibility as much as possible. And when you catch yourself kind of spiraling about those future unknowns, just know that's just your mind playing tricks on you. That has nothing to do with what's possible for your child. These kids are incredible. When we take the time to really fully meet them where they are and become fluent in who they are and their language and find what sparks them and use that as a way to help them become their best selves, everything is possible for them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, and it's 100% worth it.
You said something that just literally brought tears to my eyes. Choosing your child. And then realizing that when we choose our children, whoever they are, we're choosing ourselves, we're choosing our life, and you're choosing to live on your own terms, not with my child should be doing that, right? Byron Katie says, stop shoulding all over yourself, which is, I should do this, I should do that. And realizing we're choosing this life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's magic. And that's really going to tilt or shift the perspective in how people show up in the world, because I truly believe we're being called to show up in our greatness, to show up in, our purpose and why we were put on this earth at this time. And our kids have big purposes. Big purposes? That doesn't even make sense. Our children, they got work to do, and we got to get out of their way and meet them at their level and stop with our own bullshit of we need to, die and suffer and give everything to our children so that we're like this withering little leaf. We can feel full and co-create this life with them. And it's not going to be done in the current systems and structures. It's going to be done in structures that we've created. And people like you, Debbie, who are like, this is not working. We need to create something else. There's whole communities and tribes out there of people who are doing it. So thank you. Where can people find you? We talked about it at the beginning, but where can they get your book? Show us your book again. You can get it on Amazon and such. Where can they find it?
Yeah, it's at it comes out June 12th. So
okay, that's a good thing to say because depending on when we're listening to this, June 12th, 2018.
Yes, and there are awesome pre-order bonuses if you order before then, that I'll just say. And you can find out all that information on tiltparenting.com. There's a books tab. I'm also going on a book tour in the US in 9 cities. So if people want to come out, I'm trying to create real community events and bring the tribe together for inspiration and to really kick off the revolution. tiltparenting.com is the best spot. And I also have a Facebook group, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter, all at Tilt Parenting.
Awesome. And the podcast as well.
Yeah, podcast is there. I just dropped episode 109, I think, last week. So there's a lot to go back and listen to for people.
Cool. So what cities will you be going to in the U.S. so far?
I am going to Baltimore, Emmaus, Pennsylvania, which is near my hometown, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Maplewood, New Jersey, and New York City.
And if there's anyone listening to this and they want to get you to come because they have a little group of people, how can they do that?
Well, I am available to Skype and book clubs, first of all. So if you do a book club, let me know. I do live in Amsterdam.
You do live a little far.
But I will Skype in. I want to talk to as many people as I can about these ideas and get people really excited. And also if you go to tiltparenting.com/tour, at the bottom of the page, there's a form you can fill out if you want me to come to your city. I hope to come back in the fall to do a couple of weeks and do some more school visits. And so I'm trying, when I get back this summer, I'll start piecing together what that might look like.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I can't wait to read it. I don't have my hands on it yet, but I'll be diving in and sharing because I think your message goes beyond differently wired. I think we're all differently wired, and the world needs to realize that every individual is unique, and we have work we need to do in this world, and we need to get on that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. This was awesome.
Yay. Oh.